Brigadier General Rob Holman. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss modernization of our grievance system, which is part of a broader institution-wide movement to evolve our military. Cet effort allant d'initiatives générales des forces.
This effort, from whole-of-CAF initiatives to grassroots work being done on ships, at bases, wings, and even on deployments, is to ensure that our institution meets the expectations of current members, potential members, and the Canadian public, and also to ensure that it aligns with their values.
Firstly, to instill a climate of respect, inclusivity, integrity throughout the organization. And I view as an analogy fitness and the gym. You just can't go to the gym once and call yourself fit. It's got to be a continuous effort. And our efforts to modernize our institution, to change the way that we deal with people, to continue to evolve, they have to be continuous as well. And this is all firmly embedded within the values and ethical principles laid out in our Canadian Armed Forces ethos, which we published in 2022 and which I'm very proud of, Trusted to Serve, which is a foundational document for our military profession, and a document which we've shared with numerous allies to their appreciation. The Canadian Armed Forces has undertaken a number of broad reforms. Modernizing our grievance and complaint processes are a critical element of this work. You know, for example, the grievance system that we have is still modeled after an industrial age system in which organizations favored stability and predictability over responsiveness and timeliness. And those two aspects are required to thrive in the information age. Our intent is to make it easier for members to submit grievances, make the system more responsive to their concerns and situations, and to resolve their concerns in a timelier way. And we've made some significant strides to streamline processes, enhance accessibility, and ensure that all members have a fair and impartial avenue to address their grievances. An example of this work is the digital grievance submission form, launched 2 months ago. And this form is intended to simplify, standardize, and streamline both the submission and resolution processes, and initial reports are good. We're also in the process of establishing a new grievance center of expertise in the fall of this year. And this center of expertise will allow members and the chain of command to have direct access to grievance experts, providing them with direct support on submitting and adjudicating grievances, and moreover, allow us to identify systemic issues across the institution to give us the justification to take rapid action. However, we're not waiting for perfect solutions to be implemented to adapt to the new environment. And we recently implemented a pilot process to clear the backlog of files in the grievance center, or grievance system. This is a key driver of our grievance transformation efforts. Supported by a diverse multidisciplinary team of military and civilian leaders and policy experts, this pilot project has succeeded in achieving 2 overarching objectives. First, it has significantly reduced the number of backlog grievance files. This work has set in motion the steps required to finalize a substantial number of these files in the coming weeks and months. And second, we are leveraging the new tools and lessons learned from this pilot process to inform our broader grievance system transformation efforts. And this effort at reducing our backlog was led here by General Simoneau, who is prepared to discuss in more detail. So increasing the use of informal resolutions, direct engagement with policyholders and commanders, and the deployment of new delegated authorities are all elements of the pilot process that can be brought forward to streamline our grievance system and make it timelier and more responsive to individual grievers. Nous travaillons à la mise en œuvre.
In addition, we are working to implement Recommendation 10 of the Arbor Report, which focuses on prioritizing and fast-tracking grievances related to sexual misconduct. We expect our response to this recommendation to be fully implemented by the end of this year.
The effectiveness and independence of review bodies like the Military Grievance External Review Committee and the Office of the Ombudsman are also critical to our work in these areas. and 2 bodies that I engage with on a regular basis. These independent bodies, among others, provide the necessary review and independent analysis to ensure the continued evolution and improvement of the Canadian Armed Forces. So our goal is to develop solutions that are responsive to the needs of our members and align with best practices in grievance resolution and organizational excellence. So we don't claim to have all the answers here, and that's why it's so important to reach out to external experts and be open to that advice. Mr. Chair, it's imperative that we ensure the well-being of our personnel and address any systemic barriers that hinder their ability to seek redress without fear of reprisal. This includes providing timely and transparent access to grievance decisions while also protecting personal information. We are committed to further modernizing the grievance system and care for our people. Our operational effectiveness is based on teamwork and cohesion, and they in turn are predicated on trust. Trust in a system that will look after them. Given the deteriorating security situation around the world, this trust is imperative. We must continue to move forward and pull ourselves into the information age. So I'm going to change gears here a bit and talk a bit about you. And I want to express my sincere gratitude to the members of this committee for your unwavering dedication and commitment to the rigorous oversight of matters concerning the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces. And as I stand by you today, or before you today, I recognize the privilege it has been to contribute to your important work. Your steadfast professionalism, thorough examination of legislation, and diligent scrutiny of policies and programs have undoubtedly strengthened our national defense capabilities. I've said often that a pillar of military professionalism in a democracy is its subservience to duly elected civilian rule. It's a pillar that we must continually remind ourselves of, and it's a pillar we must all embrace. And you help maintain that imperative, so thank you. Now, as the chair said, this is likely, maybe not, but likely my last appearance before this committee, and so I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation for the invaluable opportunity to collaborate in the service of this country. Now, I have full confidence in the continued excellence of this committee's endeavors and full confidence in whoever the government selects to come in behind me to provide the same level of engagement with you. And I extend my best and wish you all the best in your future endeavors. So in the twilight of my career, and I mentioned the same thing to a group of young students here at lunch, my second speech of the day, I think this is my fourth, including a group of young officer cadets, that I know this is an institution on the upswing. And despite all the challenges, the dark clouds on the horizon, the deteriorating security situation that we face around the world, I am confident that this institution is on the right path. And as I told that new generation of leaders, I am envious. I am envious of the challenges they're going to face because this is about the journey, and I would do it all over again. So thank you for your unwavering commitment to the safety and security of Canada, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Eyre, and thank you for those kind words. And thank you for the enthusiasm of appearing before the committee. I can only imagine the enthusiasm varied from time to time, however. So, with that, we'll turn to Mr. Bazan for the first 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and General Eyre. I just want to say thank you for your incredible service and tenure as CDS and your entire military career. It is an undertaking that we're all very thankful that you've been there in the position of leadership during some difficult times, everything from COVID to war in Ukraine and the increasingly dangerous world that we seem to find ourselves in, and trying to navigate through that despite tight budgets and cuts in those budgets at times, and also all the other things that have happened within the Canadian Armed Forces. He stepped into a situation that had the entire CAF in turmoil following one of your predecessors. So thanks for coming in, stabilizing that ship, and moving the troops in the right direction. We're here talking about transparency, and you did talk about that in your opening remarks. And so the chair and I both spoke last week at the Defense Intelligence Conference. And one of the concerns that I raised, because we talk about making sure Canadians understand the importance of our Canadian Armed Forces, the situation that we find ourselves in, how do we change public perception? And a lot of it comes down to the classification of information and the overclassification of that information. If Canadians are going to understand the threat environment, then we need to be more blunt with that information. And this committee, of course, does not have any security clearances. And so the information that is shared around this table, the information that is shared with the public, is limited and only through open source. Do you believe that there needs to be a change in how the Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defence handles information so that we can make sure the public are on side with the expenditures, the investments, and the missions that we have to undertake to keep Canadians safe?
So, Mr. Chair, yes, I do agree that we need to continually evaluate how we classify information, and we need to have a mentality of, instead of need to know, a need to share. And this is an approach that we have discussed amongst our closest allies as well, because often there is a tendency to compartmentalize information that would be better effective in sharing. So it's a question of balancing synchronization with security, understanding with security. And so we must continue to question, are we overclassifying information? And the default position can't be to put secret Canadian eyes only on it. Now, going to the second piece of your remark. In fact, just 3 hours ago, I was talking to my UK counterpart about sharing information with parliamentarians. And I believe that this committee should be granted security classifications so that we could share with you in more detail some of the activities and intelligence and the like that are ongoing. That's a personal opinion, but I think the country would be better for it.
It's an opinion that I share and one that I've articulated on many times over the years that I've been on this committee. Richard Shimoka, who was at this committee, said that public understanding the military is at an all-time low and contributes to the lack of support. This is in part due to the lack of open information available and the adversarial relationship that has developed between government and outside bodies over access to information. So just to add to that, I think we actually have to make sure that ATIPs are happening in a more efficient manner. We know for a fact that my own ATIPs that have been submitted in the past, that some of them were outstanding over 5 years. I had 5 over 5 years, up to 7 years old. 4 of those have finally gotten acted upon because Bill Matthews and Bill Blair showed up at committee and heard the complaints, and now 4 out of 5 all of a sudden magically have been answered. Now, we also have heard from former serving and current serving members about the challenges they've had with everything from ATIPs and to the Military Grievance External Review Committee. The Information Commissioner herself, who is taking Department of National Defence and the Minister to court on 3 separate occasions, says the issues are the same and they haven't changed much. And she used to work at Military Grievance External Review Committee over 10 years ago. So have you had conversations with the Minister and the Deputy Minister or the needs to prioritize the information, as well as we knew that you don't have all the appointees sitting at the committee right now, that if you're going to be able to properly represent and stand up for our troops, that grievance committee has to be, 1, more quick to act, and 2, that there is a full slate of committee members?
So, Mr. Chair, two aspects. Firstly, on the ATIP piece, I agree we must do better. And there are a number of lines of effort that we are working on the department side as to how to speed things up, whether from a technological information management perspective or from a process personnel capacity perspective. And you asked about conversations. In fact, tomorrow at Defense Management Committee that is co-chaired between myself and the Deputy Minister, this is one of the agenda items where our Corporate Secretary will be briefing us on how we're going to make it better in the numerous lines of effort. On your question with respect to the committee, yes. We need to ensure they have the capacity, but we also need to make sure that we're giving them the right grievances to review as well, so we are not overwhelming them with grievances and ensuring that their much valued capacity is targeted at the highest payoff grievances. I'm going to ask General Simoneau to speak to this.
Nobody's going to move on. We're at well past 6 minutes. Ms. LeBlanc, congratulations on your permanent appointment to this committee. So 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. General, transparency is not only about disclosing information, but it's also about ensuring that it's easily accessible and understandable to the public. How does the Canadian Armed Forces communicate information about its activities, expenditures, and decision-making processes in a really clear and transparent way?
So in terms of expenditures, those are more on the departmental side under the purview of the Deputy Minister. And those are clearly articulated in the annual reports that we publish to Parliament. And I don't know if he had the opportunity during his testimony here to speak in more detail on that, but that's probably the best source of that type of detailed financial information. It's really outside of my realm of responsibility. In terms of our own activities, within the realm of force protection and operational security, we need to continue to showcase the great work that our people are doing around the world and in this country. Every time I get out and meet with our people, whether it's overseas on operations or here at home, I am inspired. And in fact, many of them tell me as they embark on some very important operations, whether it is our mission in Latvia, whether it's training Ukrainian armed forces, they tell me this is the most meaningful thing they have done in their lives. We need to get that message out. We need to continue to get that message out to Canadians. I don't think the Canadian Armed Forces can do this alone. And this is something I would ask you, committee members, to do. In fact, all of our elected parliamentarians is to get out and talk about the necessity of supporting our Canadian Armed Forces. As the situation in the world becomes more difficult, I believe that the Government of Canada, is going to continue to call upon the Canadian Armed Forces more and more and more. And so what is needed is a whole of society effort to make sure that we've got the institution in place and the understanding of that institution in place to be able to address those challenges of the future. What we need more in this country, and I've been saying this to a number of groups as late as when I did my third speech of the day about an hour and a half ago, that we need to have a national security dialogue in this country to raise the awareness, not to spread fear, but to raise the awareness of the realities of the security situation out there. And everybody in this room and listening in can help in that endeavor.
In your opening remarks, you talked about modernizing and changing the way, modernizing your systems and also changing the way you deal with people. And as an example, you cited a significant improvement around the backlog of grievance files. Can you talk to us about how you'll ensure that is a sustainable improvement and not a one-time improvement?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn to the expert, General Simoneau. He briefed me on this yesterday, but how he's going to ensure that those lessons are moved into the Center of Expertise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we ran a pilot project, as was mentioned by the Chief of Defense Staff, and we operated as a board, bringing together all around the table all the subject matter experts to solve for the members and to find more rapidly, more timely the tools to solve for the grievances. So we intend to formulate a center of expertise that will replicate what the board has used to go through a high level of of grievances within 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks, we pretty much significantly cleared the backlog, as was mentioned by the CDS. And I think that espousing that new way of doing business will enable us to move much faster for our members. Thank you.
And General, can you discuss the challenges and the obstacles that you encountered in your efforts to improve transparency within the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces, and how you're addressing those challenges?
Mr. Chair, I think the issue is the same as many of the other challenges we face. It's one of culture in terms of risk and tolerance. And we must be more willing to take some short-term risk for long-term gain. And we saw that very clearly in the efforts that General Simoneau led to address these grievances. We have a cultural tendency to aim for 100% solution that is completely legally airtight but will take forever. No, let's go for an 80%, 90% solution, but speed is of the essence here. And that same principle can be applied to so much that we are facing.
You still have about 50 seconds.
All right. So looking ahead, what are the priorities for further enhancing transparency within the department?
So in terms of priorities, it's making or streamlining our ATIP process to make sure that is much more responsive. It is making our grievance process much more responsive and transparent in terms of communication with the grievers so that they understand where it sits. And it is continuing to make sure that we communicate the message of the great work that we're doing around the country.
Madame Normandine, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take these moments to thank you, General Eyre, for your very generous appearances here before the committee and your answers that have allowed us to formulate some excellent recommendations. It's disappointing to lose you, but we wish you the very best, and perhaps you'll come back one more time, who knows? I do have a long question. I hope I will be clear in asking it, but take all the time you need to answer. It's a question that is based on something a military member mentioned to me. He said there had been 3 independent reviews on the grievance process, but still there are delays. The process is laborious. He said there's an old federal decision that confirms that members are not linked to the Crown through any work agreement, which means that the grievance process, regardless of how it is changed, will always remain internal within the forces. There will never be any option of recourse to an external system. I'd like to hear what you have to say about this. Is the problem not being perceived from the wrong end? Should we not also consider reviewing the way in which military members are hired? The fact that they're not necessarily public servants. They don't have a work contract or anything outside of what's happening on the inside. Reviewing that process, could that be an option if we want to improve the grievance process? And again, we've already started this discussion, I feel, with Minister Blair when we were discussing perhaps having a period of time for 2 years to see if they like it or not, to have sort of, it feels as though there is a bit of change in the way in which people are thinking of approaching things. So would that be a possibility that the way in which the military members are hired could be related to the issues? Is this a perspective, a lens that we should take on grievances?
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, that's an interesting question. I am not sure if there is a link between the recruitment, training, and probationary period and the grievance system. To me, it's hard to draw a straight line between those. But I must add this. Today, members with a grievance at the end of the process, they always have the option for judicial review, which would be external to the Canadian Armed Forces. So I'll ask General Simoneau to add, if he may, his thoughts on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I would add is this, quite simply. Our employment is codified in the National Defense Act. So we're not public servants, but we do have a good framework for the work that we do. The grievance system is not simply within the forces, as our Chief of Staff said, that you can go before the federal court afterwards at the higher level. What's important is to make sure that members can reach federal court in a way that could resolve their problems. So we need to we need to act more swiftly than we have in the past. That member who said that there were still delays, it's true, but that's precisely the burden that we're trying to deal with by adjusting the grievance system, also by changing the way that it operates entirely. We're redoing the entire system. The purpose of that is to make sure that members, once they've gone through the initial authority, the final authority, that they could then have access to the federal court more quickly, so that they could gain satisfaction from that. They do have a grievance. They're very valid. Sometimes we can't resolve them. They need the opportunity to have access to that recourse. Mr. Chair, our JAG also has something to add. If I understand the question correctly, it touches on the relationship between the Crown and members of the Canadian Forces. In the context of constitutional law, the Charter, I would say, is open. It's up to Parliament to reconsider that relationship, as General Simoneau mentioned. It is defined by the common law, but also under the National Defense Act. That's an idea to consider. Thank you. It's interesting. We're trying to look at every possible avenue, and perhaps another question. One of the reproaches that this military member was mentioning was that the Chief of the Defense Staff has the ultimate power of redress, and then if you have to go through the federal court, then it's a very long process. Should this power to redress also be offered to other entities outside of the military system when a grievance is allowed? Mr. Chair, I'm responsible for discipline and good conduct of our forces. So it is my responsibility as the CDS within the system, as far as I am concerned. We need to maintain that responsibility within our force as an institution in our profession to make sure that we can continue to lead our forces. Anything to add? What I would say, General, is this. It's important. You know, we were mentioning the importance of the committee. You provide some excellent advice, which is unbiased and unfiltered, very useful for us. And so I have been with the CDS on a number of occasions on the issue of grievances, and we really...
We're going to have to leave it there. Merci, Madame Normandine. Ms. Mass, in 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. I think that a lot of the questions that have been asked already were similar to mine in terms of the cause of those delays being, unfortunately, at the feet of that link of final authority. There's 4 to 5 years that is held there. So in terms of that weight, that where grievances aren't resolved and the stress and trauma that can also cause, that has a lasting impact. That certainly is something that we have to address from a government perspective as well. But in terms of that moving out and away from that chain of command with the final authority, I know that you spoke about it a bit, but if you could reemphasize, is there any other option that exists, or you talked about streamlining, you talked about those things, but is there any other option you haven't mentioned yet?
Mr. Chair, so as I mentioned in the last session, once the decision is made by the final authority, the member, the griever, has got the right to go for judicial review, which is external to the organization. And so that is one avenue as well. In terms of looking at other models, I'm not sure if the team has done that or not, but
So we've done that, and we inspire to a great amount from the public service. So the way that they operate, the way that they try to solve through informal resolution, when they bring people around the table, all the subject matter experts, as we operated with the board as a pilot project, we inspired ourselves from our public service colleagues. Because we truly accept the fact that those delays are unacceptable, and we were trying to solve, and that's where we brought in our public service colleagues. And I think that the big backlog, as we've known them, are a thing of the past. I'm very confident that we're transforming the system in the right direction.
One of the things that we've consistently heard, whether it's from a lot of the external those external forces, those checks and balances, those offices that are supposed to keep our government overall, but certainly the D&D accountable, the Information Commission, Privacy Commissioner, the Ombudsman himself, and the military. We just heard we had a scathing report in 2023 from the Military Police Complaint Commission stating that there was a refusal to release necessary information, and that they didn't have many of these offices. They do not have the jurisdictional teeth or an enforcement. I've tried to bring that forward in a piece of legislation to provide them with the independence, the ombudsman with an independence on that. I'd like to hear your opinion on whether that independence is important, or what further aspect of that teeth in terms of ensuring that we are as transparent as we possibly can be is important, or where we need to go with that.
So, Mr. Chair, I will admit I do not have a strong opinion or strong view either way about the reporting mechanism for organizations like the Ombudsman. I do know, and I'm proud to tell you, that we have a good, solid relationship, and we meet frequently and value the input of these various independent actors. And indeed, just had the opportunity to review a draft report that the Ombudsman is going to be coming out with related to what we're discussing here, and very supportive. When we meet, our list of issues is virtually the same as we hear from our members and the challenges that they face. In terms of the Military Police Complaints Commission and their annual report, this is a case of two reasonable actors who are having a disagreement on certain things like what constitutes policing-related complaint, the access or releasability of information when it's protected by solicitor-client privilege. And so they're asking for the courts to determine where that line is. This is a rational way of addressing the challenge. But in terms of the degree of independence, whether they report to the minister, whether they report to Parliament, I am not convinced either way that that would affect their investigations. I am happy with the relationship that I have with them and value their advice.
What about the issue, however, that one of their main concerns from that Military Police Complaint Commission is that they actually can't even access the information, that's one of the biggest problems, that there is no good relationship in that way in terms of the release and access to the very information, let alone the rest of the process?
Mr. Chair, given that's before the courts, I can't really comment on it. I don't know if the JAG has more perspective.
Similarly, can't comment, but Mr. Chair, I guess the one thing I would emphasize is the importance that the important roles that the MPCC plays in ensuring the confidence of Canadians and members of the Canadian forces that military police are acting in a professional and independent way. And so resolving those issues is important. The fact that they've chosen the courts to do it, I think, is one that we have to respect.
Respect, but also try to avoid in the first place.
That brings us to our second round, which is 5 minutes. Ms. Gallant.
Mr. Chairman, through you to General Eyre, on October 10th, 2022, I asked you how the military's vaccine mandate was impacting recruitment and retention. So in the interest of transparency, and given Health Canada is no longer authorizing AstraZeneca COVID shots, will you kindly provide this committee with all the legal opinions you told the Canadian press you had received in addition to the August 27th, 2021 briefing memo presented to you by Major General Trevor Caggiot?
Let me just intervene at that point. Generally, legal memos are protected by solicitor-client confidentiality. I'd be interested in Jag's opinion as to whether that is a reasonable.
Possible, Mr. Chairman, if you could just have them, that would be really helpful, because I want to prevent a raft of new grievances, by asking if any recent directives, or for the recent directives and any Canforgens that have been sent out requiring that new recruits must have COVID shots before being deployed to a unit after passing basic training.
Again, let's resolve this issue as to whether the undertaking being asked for is within the legal competence of solicitor-client privilege. I'd be interested to solve that issue. It's a legitimate question, but it's not necessarily something that a client is in a position to release the solicitor from. So if I could get your opinion, General Holman, I'd be grateful.
So, you know, I'm not the committee's lawyer, unfortunately, but what I will say is it's generally understood that in legal advice given to the Crown, the client in that space and the person who can make determinations as to whether or not to waive solicitor-client privilege is at least at the ministerial level and generally at the Governor and Council level. So it's not an undertaking that the CDS could give under the circumstances.
So the waiver of the confidentiality would lie with the minister in this case. Okay, well, I appreciate that.
Thank you. And for your intervention, Mr. Chairman, I hope you add my time that you just used. So, thank you. So on Tuesday, Global News reported that CanSoftCom had a change of command without any public announcements. Why did CAF wait until after Global News reported on the takeover by Brigadier General Steve Hunter for Major General Steve Boivin only after it was announced in the news?
So, Mr. Chair, to correct the record, there was a news release that was prepared, and I'm not sure of the exact timing. I imagine it went out concurrently, but it had nothing to do with any particular news outlet releasing a story of it. There was nothing to hide there. We are working on making a deliberate transition of changes of command, as is normal this type of year, or this time of year, because some of the promotions are still pending. Based on some government decisions, we have not released the entire general and flag officer plot yet because it hasn't been finalized yet. But as we take a look at having a very deliberate transition, this is the first of a number of moves, as is normal.
How would you advise your successor in ensuring that CAF be more transparent?
So, Mr. Chair, getting out and telling Canadians an accurate picture of the security environment and the challenges we face and the successes we have on a regular basis, I think is important. I will be advising my successor to come to this committee when invited. Not that they would have a choice, but getting out and encouraging others to communicate with Canadians as well. It cannot just can't be all communication from the CDS. In fact, often our most credible spokespeople are our most junior ranks.
Two more quick questions. So in your opening remarks, you asked about Petawawa. Wanted to let you know there's a little crisis going on there now. You mentioned how fitness was important, a fitness activity with a league. All the regiments in golf, the entire golf course is being shut down, not to mention what it's doing to the children of deployed personnel who do not have transportation off the base to engage in activities. So I wanted to, when you're retired or even before, to look into that, and it's a self-sustaining entity, and it's really important to that community. Now, we heard that some ATIP requesters currently serving had faced reprisals from their superiors for simply requesting information. What do you have to say for those service members facing this abuse? And what do you have to say for those superiors that are currently committing this misdeed?
So, Mr. Chair, any allegations of that need to be reported and investigated. And so my one comment would be this would be unacceptable.
Thank you. Now, we had Colonel Vihar Joshi telling the committee that it would increase transparency to have all the grievances come to him as discretionary or mandatory to receive an independent review and opinion before final authority. We heard from you the opposite. Can you explain the contradiction?
So, Mr. Chair, it's a question of capacity and speed. How quickly can we, and responsiveness, and getting those grievances that truly need to be reviewed by the committee versus those that can be informally resolved. I'll ask, I know General Simoneau has looked at this one in detail. I'll ask him to add his comments.
All I would add is we truly value their input, and we want to focus them on the important files. And about 40% of the files are going to them, mostly on compensation, benefit, harassment, and healthcare. And that's where we need them the most, to have an unfiltered, unbiased point of view to offer to us. Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Gallant. Ms. Lambropoulos, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here to answer some questions today. General Eyre, thank you very much for your service to our country, and I wish you all the best in your retirement. So the CAF has undertaken several significant and far-reaching reforms under your leadership, and I'm wondering if you can tell us which ones are the most significant as of late, and which ones members would have already noticed being taking place.
Mr. Chair, that's a big question, as we've undertaken so many change efforts over the course of the last number of years. You know, whether it's on the reconstitution of our forces and growing our numbers, and you know, from that perspective, I'm very proud that over the course of the last fiscal year, we've grown both our regular and our reserve force after 3 years of shrinking. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that those changes that we've made in our system and continue to make in recruiting and retention are bearing fruit. Continuing to evolve our culture, of which we've discussed one aspect of that, the grievance modernization, that needs to continue as well. You know, very shortly you're going to see a culture evolution strategy being published, along with a comprehensive implementation plan for all of the various external reviews that we've had. Where in terms of time are those being addressed? You've seen a number of those being brought forward already. The change in focus from regulating ourselves out of a problem to one that's value-based. And what I mean by that, tied to the publication of Trusted to Serve, these are the values to which we aspire. We are not going to be able to put a regulation in place for everything. So as opposed to sink to the level of the regulations we put in place, we are aspiring to the values which we articulate. That is a significant change in approach.
I agree. I think you've said it well. A while ago, actually on April 17th, we had a witness come before this committee and talk about the fact that Officer X, who he didn't name, had a 14-year history of sexual misconduct within the forces and had recently gotten a promotion. And so when we talk about the necessity of changing the culture, you know, hopefully that is taken into account and bad behavior is not rewarded, but rather it is punished. And how can you ensure, or how can a future a future general ensure that these changes are made and actually have an impact on making sure that this doesn't happen again?
Mr. Chair, this goes back to my opening comment in the analogy of going to the gym. We must be continuous in our efforts to address conduct, address issues that address challenges that are not aligned with our core values. You know, given that I'm the FA for this specific case that you brought up, it's been kept at arm's length from me, but I'm aware of those allegations, and it'll be coming in front of me in due course. I know General Simoneau is more au fait with that case, but in general, our society continues to rapidly evolve. Now, you could argue there's been more societal change in the last 10 years than in the last 50 combined. And what that means for us as we strive to reflect the values and the changing nature of Canadian society is we have to continue to change and evolve as well. There's no end state for this. There's a steady state of change, continuous change.
1 minute left? Okay, well, there's not much that I can ask, and you can answer it within a minute, but I would like to, I guess, push on and insist on the fact that this is, I think, the biggest change that needs to be made. And it couldn't have been said better by that witness, by explaining that people are more afraid of being truthful and of being honest and of being good than they are of being bad, because the bad keeps on getting rewarded. So I think that's like the underlining thing that needs to change within the CAF. And do you agree with that statement?
Well, Mr. Chair, I will just add to that. It's been my observation that our members are much more willing to come forward than they have been in the past. And so for me, that is one sign that, yes, we are making positive change. It's not going to happen overnight, but as long as we identify those pockets of resistance and keep moving forward, we have to keep, as I said, keep moving and keep our foot on the gas and keep it as an area of focus.
Thank you, Ms. Lambropoulos. Madame Normandine, 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. Thank you. A quick question. Recently, we heard that the Canada Border Services Agency had lost the equivalent of 12,000 access to information requests. Is this something that also affected DND, or if you looked into it so that it wouldn't happen? This was in the context of an IT update. Just wondering if you had taken some precautions at DND to prevent this type of thing happening. Mr. Chair, I am unaware of the incident, so I have no comments. Thank you. On the matter of grievances, again, I've heard some people say that there was officers saying that, oh, you know, I have so many grievances against me. Listen, if you don't like it, you know, you can send another one to me. This is something that they used to say in the past. I know a lot of change has happened, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about this. What would lead us to believe that in the future, in a situation where you might have a number of grievances that have been received, that have been processed quickly, that there might not still be an incentive to say, you know, I'm not afraid of grievances because the response is a denial or the redress is not going far enough. So will that problem be addressed? The fact that the grievance itself on its own doesn't scare a military member, and how could that be solved? And is there anything in C66 that we will be studying shortly on that issue? Mr. Chair, that is an aspect. This is not something to be proud of for a leader. To me, it's a matter of communications to avoid a grievance. According to the committee, most of the grievances are due to a lack of communications, poor communications. That is really critical for our leaders at every level of DND to have better communications with their subordinates and the superiors. What I could add, Mr. Chair, is this. It's not a grievance. A grievance is not done against someone in particular. It's about oneself. One files a grievance because we're affected by a situation. We're looking at the entire system, and when someone accesses the system through their phone, then it goes straight to the commander of the unit, and to the center eventually when we develop it or we have it, that center of expertise that the Chief of the Defense Staff was referring to. So it emphasizes and prioritizes the member. Someone who says, I have grievances in my name, that's very toxic. It's a culture we can no longer endure. It's something we won't endure anymore or accept. At the same time, we need to make sure.
Madame Normandine, 6 minutes or 2.5 minutes. Madame
So
Normandine.
Just, I guess, to follow the last two rounds of questions, I wanted to take it forward, as this may be your last appearance, and I certainly do appreciate your service as well. I'm very grateful. I wanted to talk about the new piece of legislation that was born out of the Arbor report and C66. One of the major changes that is said to be hoping to make a change is that, not a new position, but the change of the provost marshal and how that's taken out of, or supposedly taken out of, chain of command. And yet so much within the chain of command has been discussed today in terms of part of the problem of cover-up, of punishment, of not dealing with the situation. So can you give us your opinion on how that specific change within C66 actually will make a difference, or your potential concerns, so we can add it to that further study later?
Mr. Chair, I think it's more a question of perception of independence as opposed to the actual independence. But regardless, it's going to be the same process as is used to appoint the JAG as a GIC appointee. And Rob, you may have more to add on that.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think the Chief is correct, that I think that what C66 for the Provost Marshal General attempts to address is about perception. Once, even under the current scheme, once the Provost Marshal is appointed by the Chief of the Defense Staff, they can still only be removed for cause right now upon the recommendation of an independent inquiry committee following a public inquiry. That scheme, the basics of it, will remain in place under C66, but with the additional perceptual piece that comes with the Governor and Council being the appointing authority rather than the Chief of the Defense Staff. So now there's a complete removal of the role of the chain of command in the appointment of the CFPM.
Thank you all for appearing today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to Canada and to Canadians, and appreciate the testimony you've given to this committee. On the point raised actually by Madam Lambropoulos around the notion, which we have heard at this committee, that it is considered by many to contain more career risk to do the right thing than there is to suppress information. We had testimony from Patrick White, who said, quote, "I struggle to find the name of a single senior member of the forces who has been held accountable for anything other than their own personal conduct." In other words, has anyone been relieved of command for the 2,000 sexual assaults that occurred last year or in the year before that? We're still dealing with these problems 8 years after Operation Honor. So where's the leadership and accountability for the pervasiveness of sexual misconduct?
So, Mr. Chair, I have seen mid-level commanders, higher-level commanders given remedial measures, administrative action for mishandling cases, for not taking appropriate action, and so that perception, while it may be prevalent, is changing as actions, tangible actions, when required, are being taken.
You said in response to an earlier question that it is unacceptable for reprisals to take place when people file grievances. Yet we've also heard, and from other witnesses, that reprisals are subtle and they are difficult to document or to track. One member just happens to not get the promotion that another member gets, and members are left to wonder about what motivates any of a number of micro promotion is a big thing, but there are a whole series of much smaller decisions that in total look like reprisals. So how will you address, it's fair to say it's unacceptable. How will you, or how would you recommend your successor to make it, to ensure that reprisals actually do not happen?
So, Mr. Chair, the Canadian Armed Forces is very much a human organization. And what the member is talking about is human behavior, whether it's reprisals, whether it's personality conflict, and the like. And so this is a wider problem. This is a wider challenge than just reprisals. It's how we deal with each other. It's how an individual leads. And so you mentioned promotions. We are striving to ensure that promotion boards have wide representation, so it's not the voice of just one person that carries the day. As we change the way that we train leaders and have much more of an emotional intelligence approach, much more of a sense of not having a cookie-cutter solution for leading your subordinates, an understanding of power dynamics, which is now being incorporated into our leadership training. These are a myriad of human condition issues that we are addressing so that we can be a better organization. But there is not just one silver bullet for this, not just one solution, and we have to continue to advance this on multiple fronts.
Committee also heard that complaining to the Information Commissioner and the Privacy Commissioner is not an exception to getting information. It's part of the process. You will not get your information unless you make a complaint. So in other words, information is not proactively given, that delay is a built-in tactic to suppress information. So does this testimony indicate a properly functioning access to information system, and what will happen to what has been done to address this?
So, Mr. Chair, there's a number of aspects I was actually surprised to find out about in our own system. So, for example, on retirement, not that I'm interested in this at this point, but it used to be the case to get your medical records, you had to put in an ATIP request. 2018, that was changed. It's the requirement or the desire to have your own personnel records. We're changing that as well as we speak. That'll be.
We only have a moment left. The change was made in 2018, and is the problem solved? Do people get their information?
That was for medical records, and yes, that has been changed. The issue with personnel records. And some of these personnel records are quite thick. That is being changed, and actually, I mentioned the meeting the DM, the briefing the DM and I are going to have tomorrow. That's one of the aspects that's being discussed. So these are some of the proactive types of changes that we need to make.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Final questions, Mr. Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and General, congratulations on a very distinguished career, and I have a sinking suspicion that whatever you do next will involve giving back to society as well. So I appreciate your service and all that you've done for us. Let me start with some of your comments that you opened with. You talked about the institution being on an upswing, and you also talked about the incredible pace of change that the Canadian Armed Forces has witnessed. 10 years of change that we probably would have seen over the last 50 years, which I think is very telling in terms of what kind of changes have occurred in a very short period of time. Human nature, though, as it is, oftentimes there are small pockets of people who resist change. That's just how things are. And I guess my question is around it's a big institution that we're dealing with here. It's not a small office environment where we're changing the rules and there's a couple of people that we need to get on board. We're talking about, thousands of people for an institution that's been around for a long time. So when you're in the process of trying to change the culture of the institution in an accelerated time frame, and you have resistance, what kind of advice do you give to whoever fills your shoes next in terms of how to deal with that small group of people who just can't see the path forward?
So, Mr. Chair, this is an issue that has popped up over the course of my tenure, where there's the pockets of resistance that you talked about, and those pockets of resistance, if they cannot be brought along, if they cannot be educated. And often it's a case of education. But if they refuse to change for the betterment of the institution, well, they have to move along as well. And that has happened in a number of cases as well. Talking about accountability, I've seen some leaders removed because of that, because of their own attitudes, which are not aligned with the values we are espousing. We talk about culture, though. We need to be careful about change because it's not complete. There are certain aspects to our culture we absolutely have to retain. You know, the willingness to put yourself in harm's way to protect others, the willingness to leave your family behind and go to the other side of the world to do good for this country, the willingness to follow orders and do what is asked of you. You know, those fundamentals we absolutely have to retain as part of who we are and as part of the operational effectiveness to deliver for Canada. But there's other aspects, you know, the harmful aspects we have to continually identify and address those.
You also talked about the grievance process, and you said it had to be timely and responsive. I'm very, very familiar, I think, and some other people around the table are, in terms of how unions operate. And oftentimes when we see a spike in the number of grievances, and when those grievances are prolonged through the process that they take to get through whatever process they fall under, it can impact morale. And so we've heard testimony at the committee in terms of people who have complained about the length of time that it takes. How do you address morale when we don't maybe live up to the standards and timelines that we advertise when it comes to these situations?
So, Mr. Chair, the efforts that this pilot project we did, that General Simoneau led over the last number of months, has shed some light on some potential going forward. You know, as we stand up this center of expertise and digitize the process, it will allow us to illuminate areas of concern, whether policy or unit. And as General Simoneau briefed me yesterday, there was a number of specific organizations that had a higher proportion of grievances, which means we need to intervene and take action. And so having that type of queuing, if you will, you know, think of it as your intelligence feed to do some targeted engagements. So this is going to help us identify those pockets of resistance that we talked about before. Not just individuals and pockets of individuals, but policies as well that aren't necessarily meeting the intent. You know, unfortunately, some policies, our hands are tied. I get quite frustrated when a grievance comes across my desk and, you know, I find you aggrieved, but there's nothing I can do about it because the policy is held at Treasury Board, for example. In fact, the Ombudsman's report that's coming out is going to address just that. That's why I'm so keen to see it. But that type of granular analytics is going to be quite useful for the institution.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. And unfortunately, I have to suspend General Eyre, and I just want to, on behalf of the committee, thank you for your willingness to appear before the committee. You have always been a thoughtful, intelligent representative of the forces, and I particularly appreciate your thoughtfulness. You spoke earlier about the relationship between the military and civilian oversight. And this committee represents, in part, civilian oversight. And there are countries that do not have civilian oversight in their military, and it's easily lost. I appreciate your recognition that this is an important role that this committee plays in that whole aspect of civilian oversight. I also recognize that it is our joint responsibility to communicate the importance of what you and the people in your command do on a daily basis for our nation. It is not well appreciated, and I think we all need to pick up our game. I do adopt Mr. Bazan's comments about the level of secrecy or confidentiality or security. It's hard to communicate if you only see part of the story, and I think that's something that we do need to address. But General Eyre, over the years that you've been appearing before this committee, you've shown a willingness to stand up for your organization and for the values that underpin our nation. So I want to thank you for that, and just, if I may, on behalf of the committee, because the committee has no budget at all, present this to you. It is the Speaker's whiskey. So, thanks. For a minute or two and continue on with our second hour. Suspended for a minute. motion adopted by the committee and the members second. We're resuming a study in the defense of space, and joining us for this hour is Christian Liebruck, Professor RMC, a familiar face with this committee, and Thomas Hughes, postdoctoral fellow at Frank McKenna School in Mount Allison University. So I'm going to ask each of you for an opening 5-minute statement starting. I'm going to, since appearing by video conference is always more of a task than personally, I'm going to ask Thomas Hughes to go first, please. 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is a privilege to be able to provide comments to this committee. The space domain is a complex